everyone, this is Courtney from Ruby Red Farm. Today we're going to be talking about bird flu and how it might affect your backyard flock. So bird flu has been a very hot topic lately. Of course, it's been all over the headlines. Most recent news out of New York is that the live poultry sale barns have had to be shut down for 5 days because of bird flu. Now there's a new strain that's been confirmed in cattle, so it can all get kind of confusing, particularly as a backyard flock keeper. How does this giant news story affect you? So just in case you're new to the channel, we live in East Central Indiana, and here at Ruby Red Farm we do keep egg-laying chickens. We have about 200 adult hens at this point, and then we do sell those eggs to the public. In today's video, I'm going to be taking you through a brief overview of what bird flu is. I'm going to talk about why it is spreading so quickly in the US, and then talk about how it will affect your farm directly. Keep in mind, this is not a conspiracy theory video. If you are here for drones, wrong video. Go somewhere else. Not that kind of video, I promise. Just going to take you through some information that I've kind of researched and gathered on my own, and then take you through how to apply it to your farming situation. As usual though, guys, don't forget to hit like or subscribe. We appreciate you being here. Also, just as a side note, anything I mention is cited down in the description area in case you're wondering where I got all of my information from. So as this was a bit of a research project, you'll have to forgive me as I read through some of this really interesting stuff that I've discovered. So bird flu, or avian influenza as it's actually known, this is really not a new problem. In fact, there were reports of something called a fowl plague as early as 1878 in northern Italy. So again, this is not a new problem. This has been around for a long time. In 1955 is when they finally identified that it is a strain of influenza A. And then in 1981 is when they officially dropped the fowl plague name and gave it avian influenza, its more current name. Now, within avian influenza, there are two main groups that they break these different viruses into. So they refer to it as HPAI and LPAI. So that's high pathogenic or low pathogenic. So highly pathogenic avian influenza, that's the one that's getting all the press right now. That's the one that's much more dangerous and much more rapidly spreading. Low pathogenic avian influenza is, just like it sounds, not nearly as dangerous in the sense that it doesn't spread as rapidly, although it does still produce symptoms. Both types of cases can spread to humans, but human cases are relatively rare compared to the large number of cases that are affecting poultry. I believe right now this year we're at about 61 cases that have affected humans so far in the US. So bird flu now actually has been identified in cattle as well. There's now a second type in the US that's been identified in cattle, and they have actually found a few cases in cats also. All of this is really concerning, but the way that these animals are kept really explains why this is happening in the first place. And keep in mind, when it comes to bird flu, the reason you're getting such flashy news numbers is because if even one bird is infected, the entire flock has to be culled. So far since 2022, when the H5N1 virus was identified in the US, 148 million chickens have had to be culled because of this. So it is obviously a very large problem. So now that we have a general idea of what avian influenza is, I want to talk about why it's such a big problem here in the US in particular. So if you're anything like me, I hadn't really heard about bird flu until maybe 5 or 10 years ago, and even then it wasn't that big of a deal, right? I feel like though there's been kind of a shift in the past year or two where the cases have been a lot more ominous. A lot of that has to do with which strain is reigning at the moment, which I mentioned earlier is the H5N1 strain. But on top of that, it really has to do with the sheer number of hens that are being culled. And all of that traces back to how we keep chickens in this country. When we think about farming in general, when you think about, say, 1950 here in the United States, most households had at least some connection to farming, and a lot of households really did keep chickens. In 1950, in fact, 35% of the United States population lived on a farm. Fast forward to now, and farm families only make up 2% of the US population, and when it comes to chickens specifically, only 3% of households have chickens now. So where on earth are we getting all of these eggs? The way we keep up with demand is by creating these mega producers. According to one website, flocks with 30,000 or more birds on site make up 81% of egg sales in the United States. And some websites even had it higher than that. That was a conservative number. So again, 81% of eggs are coming from flocks with 30,000 or more birds. You have big, huge companies like Cal-Maine Foods, that's the largest egg producer in the US. They produce 2.5 billion eggs per year, which is just outrageous. They keep hens then in very large buildings where thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of birds are kept all under one roof. They typically, as you can imagine, are in very cramped quarters with no access to sunlight, grass, or bugs. Very unnatural way to keep chickens, right? When you think about that environment, any disease is going to spread very, very rapidly. And that's exactly what's happening right now with bird flu. Take a human example. Imagine you're at a Christmas party. There's 100 people crammed into one house. It only takes one person with a stomach bug to ruin everybody else's New Year's plans, right? We've all been there. When you spread that concept over to chickens, the exact same thing is true. These cramped hens and these commercialized egg production centers are the main reason that bird flu is spreading as badly as it is. The other reason that this is really just getting huge headlines is that if somebody's backyard flock got bird flu and 20 chickens had to be culled, it would be a really sad day, but it of course wouldn't make the news. When you see news stories, though, of 30,000 chickens being culled all at once, that grabs your attention, right? And as I mentioned earlier, we have lost millions of chickens in the United States because of bird flu. Avian influenza in general is contracted by wild birds that then spread it around. The problem, though, is that the concentrated animals in these commercialized systems are the absolute perfect incubator for a virus. So, now that I have everybody absolutely panicking about bird flu, let's talk about how it's going to affect your backyard flock and some different things you can do to minimize your risk. First and foremost, I want to say the risk to backyard flocks is very, very small. Can your small flock get bird flu? Technically, yes. But again, it's a very, very small risk. So there's no need to panic. Let me talk you through some ways, though, that you can minimize that risk even more. Number one, do not visit large poultry farms. So that seems like common sense, but if you think about even stepping onto a hatcheries farm, hatcheries, of course, are another hot spot for these kinds of diseases. So if you do have to visit a large poultry farm, make sure you are washing your shoes, washing your hands, and not going straight to visit your own chicken. Secondly, you can keep waters and feeders in an area that only your chickens can access. If possible, you may want to keep those items indoors so that wild birds are not accessing them. If you have a small flock, you may also consider a covered run as opposed to a strictly free-range type of environment. This again will minimize the amount of mixing that you're getting with wild birds and your own flock. If you get new chickens this year, you want to make sure you're isolating them properly. Some websites set up to a month. I typically try to isolate for at least 1 to 2 weeks before mixing them in with your flock. You're trying to keep an eye out then for any symptoms of illness in those birds before you mix them in with yours. And then last but not least, the best thing that you can do is to be on the lookout for signs of respiratory illness. Now, while there are plenty of other respiratory illnesses that affect chickens, this one, of course, is the most serious at the moment. If you have a chicken that's showing any signs of respiratory distress, if they have swelling in either their eyes, heads, or feet, if they have a sudden drop in egg production that doesn't align with the time of year, or if, of course, they're just acting lethargic or ill, you want to remove those birds immediately from the flock. Isolate them completely, and again, going back to not interacting with one and then going straight to your flock. You really need to keep them completely separate. In theory, if you catch it early enough, it won't have spread to other birds, but of course there is that risk. And the unfortunate reality is that respiratory illnesses of any name spread very quickly among flocks. Now, the main way that bird flu should affect your flock is that egg prices in the stores are flying through the roof, and you should end up getting way more customers and way more interest in your backyard eggs. Don't be shocked if you have a lot more customers come knocking on your door. I think I've had 3 new customers just this week. Keep in mind the overall risk of your backyard flock contracting bird flu is very, very low. The risk of it then transmitting to a human is even lower than that. But don't be shocked when you still see this as a headlining problem for years to come. And unfortunately, again, it all relates back to the very unsanitary and unethical way that we keep chickens in this country. All this adds up to even more reason to either expand or get a flock of your own. Hope you guys enjoyed this video of a deep dive into bird flu. There's so much information out there. As I always jokingly say, don't believe everything you see on the internet. Do your own homework. I think it's important to stay educated on things that affect the farming world, though. If you have any questions or have any other tidbits that you find interesting, feel free to leave us a comment. For now, though, this is Courtney from Ruby Red Farm, and I hope you all have a great day.